Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 19. Sidious could feel himself flushing from head to toe. Having stepped out of fear's shadow long ago, it wasn't fear that gave him pause, but how this vision had phrased the comment. He composed himself quickly and mentally ran through multiple reasons and outcomes this encounter would require or take. Of course I have, Bane. Deciding not to address the apparition with title, he continued, "As you put it, the tale has no ending, however." The specter of Bane threw his head back and issued forth raucous laughter, booming around the room like violent cracks of thunder. "Of course it does. Every tale does. Even yours." He finished with deliberate cadence on the final, each word issued forth in a measured, concerted effort. Not backing down, Sidious adopted a stoic expression and drew upon the depths of the dark side. "What a pitiful ruse the Sith Order has been in the past. You are nothing more than a reminder of the weakness that has plagued its vision like a contagion." He felt his anger rise with the words, emphasizing his ire and elongating the cadence with which he spoke. Working himself into a mass of seething, refined anger, a practice he had mastered long ago, he continued, "Cowardice, ignorance, petulance. These are the weaknesses with which I inherit title." He spat the words out emphatically, asserting his disdain. "The Sith will be reborn," he cackled, his voice echoing throughout the room. "Your ambition will be rewarded, Sidious, as is due. It is that same ambition that holds your senses in tether. It blinds you. You embody the dark side of the Force, of that there can be no doubt, but you do not listen to it, see it, living right in front of you." Bane took on an almost considerate expression. However, his tone did not waver. The Jedi weren't the only ones interested in prophecy. Sidious had not expected that, composing himself to prepare for battle. This was an avenue he hadn't anticipated. It speaks to the restoration of the balance. There cannot be one side without the other, or nothing will remain. You must see that. I see that which suits my purposes. I see that which can be used to suit the dark side, and nothing more. Because there is only the dark side. There is only the Sith." Sidious shot back venomously. "You fool! You bring the Sith itself to its very knees to bow before you, Darth Sidious the Cunning?" Bane shot back in frothing anger, his features growing proportionately larger, his voice deeper. "I am the Sith!" Sidious barked back quickly, his eyes flaring yellow. Tiny arcs of lightning began to dance across his fingertips. Instantly, the form of Bane vanished in a split-second swirl of the same black fog that had pronounced his arrival. Sidious was at the apex of his anger, having never gone further than this point in a specific emotion without exacting devastation. At the precise moment he acknowledged that summit, he felt his throat pinch closed, cutting off his breath. His eyes widened immediately upon recognizing what was happening, but he only became more enraged for lack of a visual target. Several voices assailed him at the moment. Some he knew, most he didn't. Darth Sidious the Cunning, one all but whispered in heavily accented basic. "Master of Sith sorcery," came another high-pitched female voice, spoken slowly and dripping with disdain. "Made himself master of Sith geomancy," one said in unmistakable Twi'leki. "And Sith alchemy, a master of the craft too?" It was the voice of his own master, the Mune asked incredulously. The voices stopped abruptly, and a moment of silence hung thickly in the air before the regulated breathing of his apprentice was heard. "Yet he exposes his fear." Vader's voice boomed through the room. "Your thoughts betray you." Or, he trailed off momentarily as if in thought. "Yes," he continued. "You truly have become your own prophecy," Vader relayed. Sidious, clutching desperately at his throat and gasping for air, tried in vain to comprehend his meaning. "You now find yourself in a position of fear, my master. Fear of losing your power. You fear me as well." "Yes, I sense it." Why would Darth Sidious the Cunning fear his apprentice? Vader trailed off again, deliberating internally on what Sidious had foreseen. Knowing Vader would never expend the power and energy necessary to utter laughter, it was a shock to hear it now, the enunciator making it even more unsettling. Your fears are allayed correctly. Yes, I will destroy you and take up my rightful place as master. Vader cut himself off, and Sidious could only hear his regulated breathing momentarily. There is more, isn't there? You fear the Togruta. Sidious had heard enough. Calling on the Force, he released himself from the chokehold and arced lightning to every surface in corner of the room. No, 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 he repeated, the depth of his voice decrying his unwillingness to surrender himself any further to these visions, and he began reciting the lines that were his mental trigger to pull himself from his meditations. He prepared to pick his mortal form off the floor in the chamber under the former Jedi temple. As he reached the final word to break the trance, nothing happened. The black mist slowed its cyclonic activity to a mere fraction of its speed. For a tension-riddled moment, the silence continued before the entire room was in a rush of motion. The ensconced blackness rushed straight at him and transformed into the form of Vader, who quickly grabbed Sidious's windpipe. Feeling the gauntleted hand surround his throat and begin to crush all vital organs and spine alike, he made one more effort to arc the lightning from his fingertips into the helmed visage of his apprentice. Still, he could only adopt a look of absolute terror as the snapping electricity rebounded harmlessly off the dark dome. And now, Sidious, you will die, Vader finished, speaking the last slowly between breaths. At once, Vader brought his other hand out of nowhere and joined his engaged hand at Sidious's neck, violently twisting in opposite directions. Sidious's body dropped to the floor immediately. Emperor Palpatine woke with a start, completely unaware of his bearings. His face pressed into a mass of dust and aged debris. He coughed a cloud of the former into the blackness of the space before him. He paused to compose his mind, asserting himself of his current reality, and pushed himself to his knees. Breathing in a full gulp of stale air, he knew without hesitation that he was in the small chamber of the Sith Temple, under his renovated residence on Coruscant. He began to chuckle as he pushed off his knees and stood up on his feet. The chuckle became an audible cackle. Of course I've seen my death again. I always do, he thought. And for the rest, he paused briefly, I now have the answers I seek. He spoke out loud for his ears alone. The burst cackle of laughter turned into a maniacal cacophony as he disappeared into the darkness for the ascending stone steps, echoing off every surface. The sounds of the morass washed over Ahsoka like warm waves of elongated embrace. What was initially sparse was mingled in a non-stop orchestra, unobstructed, unhindered, a serenade to life itself. Creatures she didn't know the names of sang to the vibrancy of their surroundings, each reacting to the song in a way that added their voice to the opera. Even the fauna that wouldn't add a voice made their presence known, as the rustling of fallen leaves and dead branches would attest. The gnarl root trees could almost be heard drinking the vast amounts of water they needed to sustain themselves through massive root entanglements. The only sound out of place was Kawani constantly slapping at herself in vain attempts to catch the various insects that seemed to love only her off guard. You're only making it worse, Ahsoka commented, unsure how that would be taken. If this keeps up, Ahsoka, I'll have no choice but to unholster this blaster and send them all to hell, Kawani replied. Why only me? You aren't getting eaten alive? The mysteries of the Force, Ani. And you're not even sweating. How are you not sweating? I look like I fell in the bog, and you're not even sweating, Kawani said in evident exasperation. The Force works in countless ways, Ani. Ahsoka caught herself. This dilemma again. She needs you, Ahsoka. Let go of the failures of the past, she told herself. I can show you what that means if you want to learn. There, she said it, and she meant it. Truly meant it. Ahsoka pulled up and turned to her, seeing the look on Kawani's face. You are just as much a Force user as I am. Degrees of severity are the only difference, and each individual has their strengths and weaknesses. She took Kawani's hands, which prompted her to close her eyes. They see precisely what you present them, and are doing nothing more than responding to their instincts. Kawani listened intently and couldn't disagree with the basics of nature, but was waiting more intently for the point. Present yourself as something to which they are not instinctually attracted. It is that simple, Ahsoka said as a matter of fact. Manifest it. Bring it to you as if it is fact. Believe it, then believe you can. It will take time, as I'll need to teach you meditations. She smiled gently and turned back around, heading for the lights. See, the insects aren't biting you anymore, she finished. Kawani stood in place for a second, realizing that Ahsoka was correct. Kawani's fascination with Ahsoka's statements resonated as they commenced their trek. Her attention focused almost entirely internally. Her mind focused on the insects that weren't even coming close to her anymore, or the oppressive humidity that plagued her earlier. Had she done that? If so, how? She turned her attention to the sights becoming repetitive, massive, gnarled roots, ever-present mist, fog hovering at various levels, and the bland shadows fleeting just beyond eyesight. She focused on the sounds, specifically her own. She wondered how her footfalls occasionally crunched on decaying material. She couldn't see through the lower clinging fog carpet and how Ahsoka seemed to miss those same materials with her steps, not making a sound at all. She felt the bead of sweat form again on her forehead and slowed, noticing that she hadn't had that issue since Ahsoka mentioned the insects. Then she felt the sting and accompanying itch of a bite on the back of her neck and understood Ahsoka's meaning. She concentrated again on the heat and itching and found her sensory perception of their surroundings obscure. The sounds faded, the sights only peripheral. Her head down, eyes focused on her hands, she ran right into Ahsoka, who had abruptly stopped. We are here, Ahsoka said with a chuckle. After apologizing, Kawani stepped to Ahsoka's side and hesitantly took in the surroundings. The lights they had been obediently following had again stopped and returned to a slowly swirling state above a small clearing in the middle of 4 of the gnarl roots. She could see a small dome structure tucked closely into the furthest root mass. Flickering lights seen through small circular openings danced slightly, and a thin line of smoke escaped from a short stack at its top. Movement caught her attention at what had to be the entrance. A small, long-eared, green-skinned figure appeared. Ahsoka shot forward with startling speed, taking Kawani by surprise. In a matter of seconds, she closed the gap between them and the green figure. She dropped to her knees and slid to a stop before the figure, throwing her hands around it just as quickly. Master, Ahsoka said, in what Kawani suspected were tears of joy as she stopped beside the embrace. She took in the sight. The figure was shorter than she had at first suspected. Deep furrowed wrinkles horizontally spanned a sloping forehead. Unkempt and stringy gray hair laureled his head, ending at the base of long pointed ears. A tattered tan robe hugged the tiny body that leaned heavily on a short wooden stick. His eyes closed, free arm outstretched to reciprocate Ahsoka's emotionally charged caress. Seeing them share their moment, Kawani understood what Ahsoka had said upon entering the upper atmosphere. She was home. Warm my heart is to see you, young one, but a woman you have become, he said, opening wide eyes set upon a short little nose and throaty but modulated voice, the likes of which Kawani had never heard before. Master, it is very good to see you well, Ahsoka said in a delicate tone, wiping several tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. She held his gaze a moment longer, noting the sorrow beneath them and recognizing delight in them, something she hadn't seen on his face since well before the Clone Wars. A friend you have brought, yes? Yoger said, fixing his gaze on Kawani. Kawani Amat, meet Jedi Grandmaster Yoda, Ahsoka said in return. Kawani was speechless. She had heard stories, everyone had, but most of them had been dismissed as legends from a time long since past, yet before her stood an authentic being, and not at all what she was expecting. What exactly was I expecting? She questioned herself. She had decided sometime into her assignment on Vindal that expectations had no place in the mission. However, this was well outside any loosely brief parameters set. Some reports had labeled the Jedi as terrorists, saboteurs, and assassins looking to bring down the Republic. More so, to the contrary, was the prevailing diatribe, especially with the Empire revoking certain liberties in the name of peace. It was a single thought that sealed Kawani's opinion. She trusted Ahsoka. However crazy the path had been or will be, she was unwilling to turn her back on that single sentiment. Not sure what to think, do you? Yoda asked Kawani soothingly. In hindsight, Ahsoka, noting his ability to ask many questions in a single phrase, let loose a slight laugh. Exhausted you both look. Come, eat and rest. Wait, our discussions can. Yoda turned and shuffled his way back into his hovel. Kawani couldn't speak, her eyes still trained on the spot he had occupied. Ani, are you okay? Ahsoka asked, looking up at her. She turned to look at Ahsoka, tears welling up, threatening to stream down her face. Ahsoka, I can't explain it. So much sorrow, yet so full of warmth and life. I could feel him, sense him. I I never had an opinion because the Jedi always seemed so far away. She stammered, unable to couple the feelings uncovered within her with an intelligible description of them when Yoda reached out to her. There is a fear I can't explain that follows that same path. The ways of the Force can be both intricate and straightforward, immense and microscopic, comprehensible and unknowable, sometimes simultaneously. There is much to be gained, but much that can also be lost, Ahsoka spoke comfortingly and from the heart. The only fear I can attest to is that you cannot unlearn what you have learned when it comes to specific things. However, Ani, we are both here to unlearn certain things that we both knew were true. She paused to assure herself that it came out right. I am not afraid of one thing, Ani interjected. What's that? Telling you I have no idea what any of that meant, she finished laughing. Ahsoka, shaking her head and laughing as well, put her hand on Kawani's shoulder, turning her toward the doorway. Master Yoda is right. I can't remember the last time I ate anything. They both laughed again as they ducked their heads and entered the hovel. Vader stared unwaveringly out of the Devastator's transparent steel viewport at the stars beyond the planet, incensed at having to play these cat and mouse games across the galaxy, but infuriated at the very idea that this mouse had led him here to this planet. Why? Had that captain known that Vader, of all Imperial retinue, would be the one to chase him down? Each time he was sure he had buried Anakin Skywalker, some new instrument would slash open an old wound and begin the bleeding yet again. Another trial beset by his master, perhaps? He dismissed that immediately. The old fool was simply using him to marshal and cow the galaxy's denizens. So why, then? Why Tatooine? Coincidence was only employed where a lack of wisdom resides, and they could not have known they were tracked. So why not jump back into hyperspace? No, there was a purpose here. They were here for a reason he was determined to learn. He spun his head to address the small cluster of uniformed officers clambering over display screens in the command deck tactical pit. General Uziel, what has your team discovered on the planet's surface? Vader needed answers. My lord, the team has ascertained that droids were aboard the pod and are following leads as to their whereabouts, Uziel replied quickly. He turned his view to the stars again and thought that through, piecing together all the details that had led him to this point, beginning with their decant from hyperspace at Scarif. He needed those plans, personally, just as severely as the Imperial cadre deemed them essential. He turned slightly, taking the whole planet into full view, the swirling shades of sullen browns and angry reds making him instinctively reach to scratch at the phantom itching of sand on his forearm, how he yearned to erase it from the galaxy, and his ideas for a suitable weapons test of the Death Star taking shape. Deciding the view was only reigniting the boiling rage within, Vader turned to leave the command deck. tapping his helmet as he passed the tactical pit, cueing its staff to keep him apprised via comlink. He concentrated on suppressing his anger. It would not do for him to scour logic for the required answers with that emotion at the forefront. The doorway to the turbolift closed behind him with a hiss as he folded his arms across his chest, mentally scrubbing away the phantom itching the view from the command deck had elicited. The confined space of the lift resonated in a medley of echoes sourced by his inhalations and subsequent exhalations. The sound had a calming effect in a way he hadn't anticipated. His mind could reach out to many issues his subconscious was working through. This incident was only a piece of some mosaic forming to thwart his master's empire, and by extension his. Yes, he assured himself, there is indeed a difference, finishing his thought. The doorway opened again with another hiss, evacuating the sonorous echo that held Vader in his trance of thought. His mind refocused immediately as he took off down the long gray hall with enormous strides. His internal calm chiming, he tapped his left wrist. What is it, General? He spoke quickly, keeping pace with his footfalls. Our team has traced the droids. They were, in fact, two of them to a local band of regional scavengers. Captain Dedarin is currently contact tracing as the droids are no longer in their possession, my lord, General Uziel said clearly but also quickly. Vader slowed. Obtain the information needed to proceed, then kill them all. No loose ends, General. No Imperial involvement should be recognized, he tasked without hesitation. Understood, Lord Vader, came the reply, and the connection promptly ended. Darth Vader's anger slowly rose again. He picked up his pace, the main hangar his destination. Chasing droids around this blasted planet is such a monumental waste of time, he thought. Again, his mind committed to the less tedious strategy of just eliminating the sphere from the galaxy. In an answer to the mental distractions, he pulled deeply from the Force while maintaining his pace, the hangar bay looming ahead. Letting the dark side energies flow through his body, both organic and non, he would be better situated to piece this mosaic together. Vader considered the incident on Tropawa and the prison break on the Death Star, which hinged upon plans, readouts, and schematics for the Death Star itself or its components. This brought the importance of the rebel assault on Scarif to the forefront, a move that was strategic suicide, but was carried out nonetheless, all of them involving the cruiser resting before him as he cleared the entrance to the hangar. He stopped before the vessel's bow and gazed at the craft, his only impression, now unassuming it looked. His vision aperture alerted him to the figures approaching. The comm log was purged and the navigation computer was compromised, Vader's deep baritone voice stated before he turned to face them. A gray uniformed officer and a white uniformed ISB tech. Yes, my lord, shortly after the main reactor was taken offline, I am afraid, returned the ISB tech. Of course it was, said Vader, returning a glance at the ship. He turned to face the officer. Execute the prisoners, immediately. The princess? Asked the officer hesitantly, not entirely sure if his question would be regarded in the manner he had intended. Vader thought that through for a moment. No, Lieutenant, he said directly. She is to be kept isolated until I give you further orders. Her fate was not his to decide. Understood, Lord Vader. And the ship? Asked the tech. Although he certainly would like to slag it, follow through with my initial order and send the distress signal, Vader replied after consideration. The comm signaled again with a chime, and he turned away from the pair before him. They in turn dismissed themselves. General, his voice sharp. My lord, the trail has gone cold. They were traced to a moisture farmstead in the southern reaches, but the droids are no longer there, General Uziel reported. Where in the southern reaches? Vader insisted more than asked. Great shot in the Jundland wastes. Of course it was. He didn't need more information. Another instrument finding its mark, exposing the old wound. Damn this planet, Vader swore to himself. He let out a low, rough rumble and felt the suppressed anger. The boiling rage and maniacal intensity of his fury explode through him and filled the entirety of the hangar. The hydraulic struts on the cruiser's fore landing gear began to snap and twist as the deck of the hangar floor started shaking and vibrating. Ear-splitting cracks echoed off the walls as hull plating from several sections of the cruiser's starboard side were sheared from their joints, sending several stormtroopers sprawling in all directions to escape both the plates and resultant shrapnel. Knowing he was responsible, Vader caught himself from losing total control and settled himself as best he could. Turning for the hangar bay doorway, he realized Uziel was still connected via active link. "Destroy the residence, burn the farm, and eliminate all occupants," he ordered without a thought. "Lock down the port cities, route Mos Espa's garrison to Mos Eisley, and prepare for orbital bombardment." He finished and aborted the connection, not waiting for confirmation. With renewed vigor, Vader motioned for the deck commander. The tight-capped officer sped over from his station. "My lord," he asked quickly. "Commander, get this wreck off my ship," Vader ordered with a wave of his hand. "At once, Lord Vader," he said a little too loudly. Heel turned and returned to his station. The soundless process slid the heavily damaged cruiser through the magnetic field and into the vacuum of space. Glad to be rid of the troublesome ship, he turned and left the bay. Quickening his pace to return to the command deck, he intended to watch the planet burn from the viewport to satiate his anger. A nondescript lurch caught his attention as the comm chimed in yet again. "This had better be important," Vader demanded, his anger reigniting. "My lord," came the voice of General Uziel in a wavering voice. "You disconnected before I could tell you. We've been ordered to deliver the prisoners to the battle station immediately." Vader came to a complete stop, but Uziel wasn't finished, and have just made the jump to hyperspace.